welcome to this webinar, Learning Lessons and Developing Tools to Tackle Cyber Violence. This webinar will last for around an hour and a half. We will have presentations from our webinar facilitators, followed by a live Q&A. So please do save your questions, write your questions down, and you'll have the opportunity to ask those questions at the end of the webinar. I will introduce our facilitators today. They are going to be presenting this topic, focusing on cyber violence, also focusing on the DeStalk project, of which WWP is a part, as is Una Casa per l'Uomo. So we will be having presentations from Berta Vall Castelló. She is the Research and Development Manager at WWP. She's also responsible for the development of our impact outcome measurement toolkit. And we will also have a presentation from Elena Gajotto. She is the Quality Manager and Project Manager for Una Casa per l'Uomo, which is an Italian NGO running Perpetrator program, a support service for survivors, and 2 shelters for victims and survivors as well. They are both experts in their field. We are very lucky to be joined by them today. Without further ado, I will pass it over to them.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending this seminar. We are really happy to present our work in progress and the lessons that we have learned in the context of the DeStalk project. So this project, as my colleague was mentioning now, has several partners, the DeStalk project, and the partners are from different countries and also with different expertise. So we have Blanquerna University based in Barcelona, who is coordinating the whole project and the whole action. Then we also have as a partner Kaspersky. Kaspersky is an IT company that focuses on cybersecurity, and it's based all around the world. So it's a multinational company. Then we also have as a partner Una Casa per l'Uomo, which is an NGO, as it has already been said, that offers services for victims, but also for perpetrators. And it's based in Italy. Elena is representing Una Casa per l'Uomo today, and we are also very happy to count with her for this presentation. And then we also have a public institution as a partner. We have Regione Veneto as a partner that is also representing the side of the public institutions and the stakeholders. That is also very important in this project. I will explain a little bit more the structure also of the project in a while. So the aim of this project, of the DeStalk project, is to train professionals who work with victims of domestic violence, professionals who work with perpetrators of domestic violence, and also other relevant stakeholders, such as, for example, public institutions, police officers, lawyers, so other kind of stakeholders that work in the context of domestic violence. The objective is to train these 3 target groups on the issue of cyber violence, and with a particular focus on stalkerware. So this training that we want to develop and that we are developing in the DeStalk project will be based on 2 different actions. One is an online training that we will offer soon in autumn, and we will describe a little bit the training in this seminar also. And then we will also adapt and create tools, more practical tools for professionals to use in the everyday practice. So I think this part of the presentation that Elena will focus on will also be very interesting in terms of practical knowledge and practical aspects. So we have been working on this project for half a year now. And today, as I was saying at the beginning, we will explain what we've learned so far and the material that we have been developing and which will be ready soon. But also, because this is a work in progress, we are also very happy to be able to present it to this audience today, that we know that you are already very knowledgeable about your everyday work and the challenges that you faced in your work. So we will be very happy also to get your feedback on the different issues that we will be tackling today in the seminar. So anything that you think that might be further developed or something that you think that might be useful for you in this context, please share it also in the chat, and we will be more than happy to take it into account also. So this was to give a little bit of context of the DeStalk project, that you can look more information in our website. And so the lessons learned and the different aspects that we will explain today is what we've learned in the context of these projects. So what are the contents for today's seminar? We will first define what is cyberviolence. I know that most of you know this already, but just to kind of set up the context of this seminar. And we will also go through different types of cyberviolence and stalkerware. Then we will move to the main part of the seminar today, which is the lessons learned in the context of the DeStalk project. And here we want to make a special emphasis on the voice of the victim services and perpetrator program professionals, and also of other relevant stakeholders. So all the lessons that we've learned in these projects is thanks to the challenges and knowledge and needs that these professionals have shared with us. And now today is the day in which we will kind of reflect on what we've learned thanks to them. Then in the third section of the seminar today, we will review the training needs. So what we've learned through hearing the needs of the professionals, we have kind of identified the main training needs. And then according to these needs and challenges that we have identified, we have developed these two main actions that I was mentioning at the beginning, the online training, and then the toolkit, the set of tools to be used in the everyday practice. So this will be the presentation today, and as Lorna was also mentioning, then we will have a Q&A session to answer to these questions and also to hear your suggestions. So any kind of comment will be welcome. So let's move to the first part that, as I said, it will be very short because I know that many of you already know that. So what is cyberviolence? How can we define it? There are different types of definitions, and we've chose this one. As you can see, cyberviolence is defined as online access to and distribution of offensive, violent, or dangerous material with the objective of causing harm, emotional, psychological, or physical damage. So as we can see here in this definition, is not just the access to materials, but also the distribution and the fact of sharing this material that is understood as cyberviolence. And I think this is a very important aspect that sometimes is overlooked, especially by some youngsters, and we will talk a little bit more about that. And also this definition, I like it because it entails the aim of causing harm. And this harm can be emotional, can be psychological, or can be physical. So it's understood that the objective of sharing this material or accessing this material is to cause harm. So this, I think this definition entails a very nice comprehensive idea of what cyberviolence is and what cyberviolence causes to the victims and survivors. So these are some examples of types of violence that can happen within a relationship. And here you can see that cyberviolence is not just monitoring or tracking the partner, but it includes a wide range of different behaviors and actions that the perpetrators can entail. So we thought that it was important to reflect a little bit on these different types of violence, because as professionals, we really need to be aware of as many types of cyberviolence as we can, because we need to know how to identify them, and we need to know also how to tackle them. So these different types of cyberviolence will have different types of actions and different ways in which we can tackle them as professionals. And also we will identify them differently. So we really have to be very aware of these types of violence. And I wanted to see a little bit what is the previous knowledge of the audience. So it would be very nice if you could let us know if you could define or if you are aware of these types of cyberviolence. So you can just open the micro and say, yeah, I know that hacking is blah, 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 in your own words. Or if you don't want to speak aloud, you can also write it in the chat. Basically to see more or less what is the previous knowledge that you have about this topic. I know that some of those are more known than others. So I don't know if there's something in the chat. No.
We have a shy audience today.
So no,
I guess when I was thinking of, sorry, my name's Claire Roach, I'm from England. When I came onto the cyberviolence, all in my head was very much focused on the sexting part of it. And some of our men do, I guess, stalking. I would say maybe cyber stalking, taking information from their media. That's what I would consider. Yeah.
Taking information, sorry?
Sorry, what was your question?
I didn't hear the last part. So cyber stalking, taking information from
like social media. So their socials, Instagram, Facebook, trying to see if they're with a new partner, that kind of thing.
Okay, perfect. So that would be the monitoring or tracking or this.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned also the sexting, probably. Yeah.
We've just got a new law in England. The threat of it, and I've forgotten it's so hot in England. I've genuinely forgotten a lot of terms. So, yeah. So a lot of that stuff, a lot more sexting and sexual images and threatening to expose that. Revenge porn. There we go.
Exactly. Revenge porn would be included in the sexting, which is sending, receiving, or sharing via phone, internet, or other devices or other means, sexually explicit videos or images of naked persons. So usually partner or ex-partner.
And we have also quite a few questions in the chat about doxing as well.
Questions or answers?
Questions and answers about some, maybe you want to talk about that. I don't know.
What did they say? And
so Naira says, what is doxing in simple words? Elaha said doxing is publicly revealing information about someone or a group.
Exactly. So sharing recognizable and often private information about the person. It can be the name, phone number, address. So sharing this information online, often because and often accompanied by stalking or threatening this person with the objective, let's say, of doing this.
Yeah, and Elaha, sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Cyber is mentioning that cyber stalking also means using stalkerware or spyware, which I think is something that you are focusing on in the DeStalk project.
Exactly. Thank you for this comment. Yes. So monitoring and tracking and cyber stalking in general is using the technology to monitor the partner's activities, social interaction, movements, etc. So this can include a wide range of activities. And one of those is using this stalkerware, And just very briefly, we have a workshop on stalkerware in our website, so you can look through it in order to get more information. But very briefly, for those of you that don't know it, stalkerware is available software that enables to a remote operator, so a partner or ex-partner that might not be next to you in that moment, to monitor the activities on another user's device without the consent, and this is very important. So they monitor your activities without a consent through this software that it's installed either on your phone, on your tablet, computer, any device that has Wi-Fi connection. And they can know about the location, browser history, text messages. They can even sometimes get to your video and voice and know what you're seeing and saying. So this is a really growing phenomenon, and that it's not very known yet. So this is why we focus also the DeStalk project on this specific phenomenon, although we have different types of cyber violence, as you will see in a while.
And then in the chat as well, Child SafeNet, I'm not sure of your first name, somebody who works with SafeNet mentioned cyber violence also may include live streaming of sexual abuse, online intimate partner violence, revenge porn, sextortion, cyberbullying. So thank you for adding that, that to the definition. And Simon has also raised the issue of upskirting and sharing, which is, of course, taking photos of people without them knowing up their skirt, then sharing those images, which I think Berta probably comes under the creep shot.
Exactly. This would be included under the creep shot or digital voyeurism, which is this taking non-consensual pictures or videos of a partner or someone unknown of intimate body parts. So this would be included there. Yeah, thank you. And this is not exhaustive because we know that this is a growing phenomenon and we have new definitions and we really have to keep on track on new forms of cyber violence. So this is just examples. Some of the ones you mentioned can be included in this kind of big dimensions, and some others probably will create new dimensions as they happen more and more. So yeah, thank you for this. So this is the aim of this slide, was just to show like the complexity of the phenomenon and how do we need to really keep update on the different types of cyber violence that can happen so that we are able to kind of tackle them and identify them. So thank you very much for your participation on this point. And now, as I was saying, or I don't know if I said it, we also have a workshop in our website focused on cyber violence in general. So you can also access that workshop to see more in detail issues of cyber violence. And now we will focus on what we've learned through the DeStalk project, what we've learned through the activities that we've been doing in order to get information on the needs and challenges that professionals of these three target groups have in terms of cyber violence. And in this context, we've done two main activities. We run focus group sessions with victims, service professionals, and professionals working with perpetrators, and also other relevant stakeholders. So we run focus group with these three different target groups in order to discuss about the training needs and knowledge gaps that they had on this issue. And also we ran a survey with also several, with these three target groups to also know about these knowledge gaps. And now what we will present here is the results and our reflections around this process. So.
Okay, so it's up to me. Good morning, everyone. We as Una Casa per l'Uomo in this DeStalk project, we have the task of creating a toolkit on cyber violence so that professionals working with victims and perpetrators can put into practice all the training that will be provided. So when we started, we didn't know how to start. So we said, okay, let's have a survey and see what our colleagues around Italy and around Europe know about cyber violence, if they are already trained on the topic, if they are already using tools for this. So we just developed a survey. You can see the link down there if you want to participate. So we have 93 answers so far, both from professionals working with victims and perpetrators, but also from a lot of public services and stakeholders that are not directly involved with victims and perpetrators, but work in the social field. And this shows a great interest in this cyber violence topic. So we are very happy that it's not just for the sector, gender-based violence sector, but it has a wider range. So what came up? Well, first we asked how much on a scale from 1 to 5, how relevant is cyber violence in their everyday work? And we found out that the average for professionals working with perpetrators is 4.13, but it's higher. Victim support services find it more relevant, 4.42. This is, on the contrary, is reflected on the fact that professionals working with perpetrators have more training on this. 35% are trained against the 23% of professionals working with victims. So it's, as you can see, it's not, these are not high numbers. So there's a lot. We need more training on this topic. And the fact that's important is that no one that answers the survey said that they have a specific tool to work on cyber violence. So, and this again highlights the need to have specific tools for us working in this field. And as again, when we speak about cyber violence, you know, we were asking, when you have, how do you label it in your forms and in your papers? And most of professionals don't have a special category to register this kind of violence. They register it as stalking or as psychological violence. Only 25% really consider it a specific form of violence and register it as cyber violence. So this gave us, you know, a picture, a photograph of the situation and on what, where to go and start working to build our toolkit. After you can move on, but okay. So we also asked them, you know, do you know these forms of cyber violence? And as you can see, you know, the red color is the yes answer. So we have high numbers for the most common forms of cyber violence that are also, you know, you can hear about them from the news, like cyberbullying, revenge porn, identity theft. These are the most common forms of, maybe not most common, but the ones that we have laws for, and the ones that are, you know, spoken about on the news. Many other forms of cyber violence are not known. Professionals do not know them, or just, you know, kind of just heard of them. But so we have to be aware that we need more training. We need to be prepared on all the forms of cyber violence. One thing that we found out during the survey here, but also we had a focus group with more than 30 professionals around Italy, that when we think in Italy here, when we speak about cyber violence, everybody starts thinking about cyber stalking and stalkerware. And all the, you know, the questions that we had during the focus group was about stalkerware and cyber stalking. But we have to remember about all of the other forms of cyber violence, because if we think about it, the damage and the harm that the other forms of cyber violence cause is very high too. So we have to be aware of all of them. For example, just when considering, you know, the risk assessment on cyber violence, we have to take into consideration every single one of this. I found a survey from an association in the United States called Civil Rights that, you know, had a survey on cyber violence, and the result was that 51% of the victims of revenge porn consider suicide. Think about suicide. So this is high risk situation. So as professionals, we have to keep in mind all of these forms of cyber violence. Okay. You can go on. Okay.
Okay, so in order to kind of summarize the information that we got from the different focus groups and also from this survey and everything, we kind of get the conclusion of the main needs that professionals of these three target groups have in this context. So for the stakeholders that participated also in our focus groups, they mentioned about the need of training or knowledge on legal aspects. So how to manage data, how to manage evidence, how to do a backup from an IT perspective. So these kind of aspects that lawyers and policemen can benefit from. And then also for the victim services and perpetrator program professionals, there was the need of having more information on these legal aspects, how to report to the police, how to collect evidence and things like this. So in this context, it was mentioned as a huge need to enhance the collaboration with other stakeholders. So that professionals from victim services and perpetrator programs have strengthened the collaboration with other stakeholders, such as police, lawyers, etc. Then it was also mentioned as an important aspect or an important need to raise awareness on cyber violence in previous stages of this violence. So to have this early intervention or this prevention approach so that possible victims of cyber violence can detect it soon, very soon. And this idea of having knowledge of possible red flags, you know, that would let us know that this is not okay, or that this can be abusive behavior. And this idea of red flags is something that then Elena will mention that we also took into account when developing the tools for professionals. Then it was also mentioned that apart from tools for professionals, it would be very beneficial to have tools for women and possible victims or survivors to know what they can do, for them to feel that they are in control, so that they know how to manage the social media, social networks, and so on. But it was also mentioned that if we give too much information, they can also be overwhelmed. So it was kind of emphasized that this toolbox for possible victims should be really like user-friendly and kind of simplicity. No? It's the importance of this simplicity. And then for the training for professionals, it was also mentioned that apart from the theory to know the content and types of cyber violence, which is very relevant, it was also mentioned that it would be important to include practical knowledge, no? The use of real case scenarios, because once you have all the content, to also be able to know how am I going to apply this content, and how am I going to use everything that I know now in specific cases. So this is something that we also took into account in the training. And then it was also mentioned the importance of education for doing these preventive tasks, no? Having this education of the risk of social media and privacy settings and so on. In this context, we're not going to go through this in this seminar today, but for the DeStalk project, we will also develop a campaign in order to raise awareness on these issues for the general public. So this is connected to this specific need that was also mentioned in the focus group, but we're not going to go through this in this seminar. And then some of the challenges that were mentioned is that there is a lack of knowledge on this topic, that some of these professionals feel that they don't have the IT skills, because obviously we are not IT experts. And again, here the important to collaborate with other stakeholders. And also about perpetrator program professionals, it was mentioned that there is this complexity that you cannot really talk too much about cyber violence in detail. So you cannot give extra information that maybe perpetrators do not know yet about cyber violence, because then you are kind of giving ideas. This complexity is always present in perpetrator programs, but in cyber violence, it's maybe a little bit more important. And then here, we also stress the importance of collaborating with victim services to try to mitigate the risk. So this is something that was also mentioned in the focus group. The importance, again, to this multi-agency cooperation in order to mitigate these specific risks. And the importance to do a kind of IT safety plan with the victims' survivors. So a safety plan focused specifically on this cyber violence and IT aspects. And this is mainly a quote that we took from a participant in the focus group. And this basically wants to reflect this idea of using, of following simplicity approach to make it quite simple, because it's already very complex, the topic, and also the important to use these real life scenarios, so that even if each case is different, there are some patterns that can be drawn throughout different cases. So we really want to emphasize this kind of practical approach also in the training. So according to these training needs and these challenges that we detected, what have we developed in the DeStalk training? As I said, this training will be available on autumn, so probably October, November, next October and November. And it will be available in several languages. So we will have it available in English, in Spanish, Italian, German, and French, which are the languages of the partners of the project. So it has different levels. We have level 1 and 2, so 4 different levels, and level 1 and 2 that are more focused on the basics, basic ideas of the content, definitions, type of cyber violence, why a gender-based violence, or why a gender approach is important on the topic of cyber violence. Then level 3 focus more on cyber surveillance in general, and also on stalkerware, so it has more IT aspects on how to manage these issues from the professional side. And then in level 4, we follow the suggestion of the participants in the focus group, and we have case examples, and it's a very applied level in which the professional can test their own knowledge. Here I want to mention also that if you feel that level 1, for example, is something that you already know, you can also take the exam and just skip this level and move to level 2. So each of these levels will have a short exam, if you want to call it like this, and then you can skip the levels if you do the exams, and at the end you get the certificate in any case. So basically, very briefly, because I want to go to the next part of the seminar, which I think it will be also very relevant. And very briefly, this online training, which is the first part of the training that we have developed, as I said, we'll have these 4 levels. And for level 1, as I said, it's quite basic in terms of why it's important to have a gender approach to cyber violence. We also explain and try to emphasize how to conduct this multi-agency coordinated action related to what it was said about the needs to cooperate with other agencies. And in level 2, we focus on the different forms of cyber violence. And this course focuses specifically on cyber violence in intimate partner relationship. So for this reason, we focus more on cyber stalking. We include cyber surveillance, cyber harassment, image-based sexual abuse, which just are the types of cyber violence that usually happen more in intimate partner relationships. Then, as I said, we have level 3 that focuses, is the more kind of IT or technical level that focuses on stalkerware. What's the legal status, how it can be installed, how to check if you have it installed in your device, guidelines, very specific, simple, as we were saying, very simple, because here we have had many discussions with our partners. As I said, we have different expertise. We have this IT company, but we also have researchers and practitioners on the field. So we really try to make it really understandable and simple, and how to detect it, how to prevent its use, etc. And then, as I was saying, level 4 is different lessons with very practical guidance on what to do when you are confronted with a case of cyber violence or stalkerware. So level 4 is different for each target group. For victim services, we will have specific guidelines and actions to take forward. For perpetrator programs, the actions are different, as you can imagine. And then for relevant stakeholders, we also have a separate set of actions that you can follow if you are confronted with a case of cyber violence. Okay, so this is in relation to the online training that, as I said, it will be available now in next autumn. And this online training provides, even if it tries to be applied and it has some case examples also, it's still on a very theoretical level. So it provides the content, the background, and the context of cyber violence. But then we thought, okay, there's something missing here according to the needs that were mentioned also, which is a toolkit, tools to really focus on the practical, everyday practice of our target groups. So Elena will explain what we did in this context.
Yes. So as Lorna mentioned in the beginning, as Una Casa per l'Uomo, we work both with perpetrators and with victims. So when we started working and thinking about the toolkit, we drew from our experience from both sides of the coin, and we had a simple idea that was to develop a toolkit for the 3 phases of our work. So the first one is to detect if there is cyber violence or not. The second one, to assess the risk for how high is the risk for cyber violence. And then the third step was how we can face this issue. So we just thought, okay, we have 3 tools that we need to develop. One to detect the cyber violence, a checklist for the risk, and a what to do guide. So it was very simple in our first ideas. Then the more we start delving into this matter, and the more complex it became, because when we got to actually working on the toolkit after the survey and after a focus group, we said, okay, let's start from the tools that we already use. So we took our, the registration form for the victim and for the perpetrator, and we started adding checkboxes there to see, okay, cyber violence, yes or no, which form, cyber harassment, and so on. But then we said that this is not the way we have to go. So yes, we added a few items, but you can go on. We added a few items on our tools. We adopted them, but then we decided to go on a whole other route. We decided to change, because that was not what we wanted to do. We want a toolkit. We want tools that are useful, but that are also usable. So they need to be practical and simple enough, easy enough to be used in everyday practice. So the first thing that we decided was to create a glossary. Why is that? Because we need shared definitions on cyber violence. It is a phenomenon that is constantly evolving, like technology, and we it's hard to find definitions that are unique for all the forms that there are, and having shared definitions is also important, because a multi-agency approach is fundamental in this kind of job. So it's important that professionals working with perpetrators and victims talk about the same thing, but also that if we have to report to the police, if we have to work with social services, child protection services, we need to start from a common point. So that's why we started from a glossary of shared definitions on cyber violence. And then we said, okay, so how, now we know all the forms of cyber violence, how can we know if there is cyber violence or not? So we started with a checklist of red flags for victim support services, because we need a tool. We need to see how things are evolving, and we need to see what are the warning signs that can come up. When we listen, and the same goes for perpetrators, when we listen to victims or perpetrators talk about their story or answering our questions, we need to pay attention to the things that they say that raise an alert in our minds. We, as professionals, we need to be aware of this. So we compile. You will see that later. We compiled a whole list of red flags. We have 6 pages of red flags so far that will help us as professionals to understand and recognize these forms. So the checklists are different, because working with perpetrators and working with victims is completely different. So the checklist for when we hear a victim, a survivor talking about cyber violence, we need these red flags. We need to be aware of the danger that this red flag entails, what kind of form of cyber violence is involved, and how to deal with it. when we hear these red flags coming from a perpetrator, we have to act in a different way, because as Berta said before, we cannot start asking directly about the forms of cyber violence or all the technical aspects, because we may just teach them how to stalk their partner. So we provided, and we will see it later, a list of possible questions to dig deeper. So then this is the first part on to assess the phenomenon. Is there violence or not? And then we just decided to go with the risk assessment checklist we have in another project that we did with WWP and ended last year. We have a protocol, it's called ASA protocol, which is for the collaboration between perpetrators programs and support service for victims. And in there is a risk assessment checklist. So we wanted to, to improve the checklist, to add items about cyber violence. So this is kind of tricky, the trickiest part, because there is not much literature about the risks of cyber violence. So what aspects of cyber violence can be considered high risk items, or what medium risk, or generic, not specific. So we just, for this part, we added a few items on the list, and then we will talk more deep about this later. And then, so this is the first part for us, the assessment part, and then we have to know what to do. And this is something that came up also during the focus group that we had. So we have professionals saying, oh, maybe sometimes it happened that a victim started talking about cyber violence, maybe having her phone monitored or tracked by the perpetrator, but as professionals, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to help her, and so I just overlooked it and just not did anything, because I'm not a tech professional. I don't know how to deal with it. I don't know. There are no specific laws on this, and on stalkerware, for example. So it's become hard. So a lot of professionals say, I don't know what to do. So I'm not able to detect the phenomenon. I'm not able to help the victim, and I don't know how to work with the perpetrator on this side. So we decided to create a cyber safety guide for support services that talk about safety planning, how to check the device, and what to do in different cases. And as we said before, we also need a cyber safety guide for victim survivors, and for us all in general, I think, because yesterday I bought a new phone and I was setting it up, and as I was going through all the initial settings, I was saying, okay, this is, if I check yes on this, somebody can stop me. If I check yes on this one, oh, they can see where I'm going, what I'm doing, and so on. So we all need to be, some tips on how to better manage our devices to keep us safe. So it's that we see it later. We decided to have an easy and very simple tool with simple explanations. On the perpetrator side, we decided to, create a group session for our programs that, works on the control issue and on the forms of cyber violence. Again, it's something we cannot go too deep on the definitions of cyber violence. In this case, we have to be a little more generic, but it deals with the controlling acts done through technology or the sharing of images. That we'll see it later. So it's not everything, it's not complete according to us. We think we also need something more that can be something on prevention. We would like to do something for young people, because we've realized that we take pictures every day, we share pictures every day, for example, but we never think about the consequences of the pictures, of the images that we share or that we take. So it's important to start from that and think about something on prevention. That could be activities in schools or something like that. We will think about it. It's not, we're not come to that point yet. And also we are going to meet with lawyers, and in Italy we have communication police. So we want to meet with them to start working on the legal aspects of cyber violence, because collecting evidence, for example, it's not, taking screenshot is not enough. I found out. I thought it was enough, but it's not. We need to collect what are called digital evidences, with digital evidence, and we don't know how to do that, or what are the instruments. So we need to go and then have more knowledge on this, and then we will think about a guide on these aspects. And this is going to be tricky because legal aspects are different from country to country. We cannot maybe we will mention a few countries, but it's difficult to have a general tool for everybody on this kind of aspect. Okay, so we can go on. Okay, so I will show you now the main tools that we devised. So, for example, this is the checklist of red flags for perpetrators programs. So in the first column, that we will change the format, but this is the content. In the first column, we have the red flags, the things that the perpetrator might say, and that we need to pay particular attention to. For example, we have, we worked on this with my colleagues that actually work with perpetrators every day. So we started the more we started talking with, we had just a couple of red flags. We were just, worried, what are we going to write in this? But then the more we went on, the more red flags came up. Or things, oh, I remember that, Mario told me this and this. Okay. So we just started we have 4 pages on these two. So for example, we have perpetrators that say they share the use of phones and PCs at homes. And he says, oh, well, I'm not jealous. She uses mine too. Okay, this may be a red flag. We need to pay attention. And so, because it can involve cyber stalking. No, the perpetrator may have access to private information, may check and track and monitor the victim. So we have possible questions that as professionals we can ask to go deeper, to investigate on this phenomenon and see if there is indeed cyber violence or not. So for example, do you think that in a relationship it's important to share everything and that there should be no secrets? Or do you get angry if your partner doesn't want you to see her phone or PC, and so on? So we have a list of red flags that deal with every form of cyber violence, not just stalkerware and cyber stalking, because we have to constantly remember that all the forms of cyber violence cause damage and cause harm to the victim. So we have to keep them all in mind. So this is the first tool for perpetrators. Then we have, if you go on, Berta. Okay, so I just, these are just sneak peeks, snippets of the tools. They are not ready yet. They are work in progress. And so just, I want to, we wanted to show them to you just to see your reactions, and if you think that this could be useful for you too. Okay. So in the group session, we have case studies. So stories told with questions, and then we have many activities that are devised to see what the perpetrators think about these phenomena, and how, if they consider this violent behaviors or not, because that is the important thing we have to focus on. These are violent behaviors too. For example, here we have the man checks his partner's WhatsApp conversations without our knowing. So they have to check if from 0 to 10, how violent is the behavior according to them, to see their opinion on this, and then work on this. We are testing the group session these weeks. So because we want to make sure that what's written in the paper is actually useful and works well with a group of perpetrators. So we hope it goes well, and if not, we have the time to change it and to do something different to really make it work and be useful. Okay, you can go on. Okay, so this is the checklist of red flags for the support service for victims. As I mentioned, it's 6 pages. It's a lot because we have a lot of red flags, and because cyber violence is really a multiform violence, kind of violence. And also, for example, when we think about cyber stalking, there's not just stalkerware, but we have also, this can be done through common apps, or I think we don't even think that some apps can be used to stalk or monitor someone else. I want to make you an example because it's something that really stuck with us. We hosted a victim in our shelter, and when she fled her home, she left her phone at home. So, and in the phone, she had an app that is public app here in Italy. It's from her public health service, and it's an app in which you can, you have the addresses of your doctors, and you have all the appointments, you have all the medical papers, and so on. So when she left her home, she fled. We went to the health authority, and we asked them to cancel the data, because we didn't want the perpetrator to know where she was, because we had to give her a new doctor and she needed appointments. And we found out that it was not possible. We can cancel the paper trail, so all the paper documents were made secret and nobody could access them, but there was nothing that we could do for the app. So all the data in the app could be used to stalk her and to see her, and it was really dangerous because it was a high-risk situation in a shelter. So it was dangerous for our operators too. So even this seemingly innocent app could cause damage and could be a tool to track and monitor the victim. So when we think about warning signs or things that we have to pay attention to, we have to really think about all the things that we do with our phones or with our computers and with our devices. So as you can see here, we have all the red flags that deal not only with cyber stalking, but also with the non-consensual sharing of images, with identity theft, and so on. If for all these red flags, we also we have written the danger. Why is it danger? Why do we have to pay attention to this particular aspect? And then the forms of cyber violence that may be involved, so that we start to learn and consider each one of them, and then what we can do if we detect this red flag. So, for example, it can be something as simple as change passwords regularly, or just change the screen lock, or check profiles, and so on. Some of these things are pretty easy to do, but before we take any measure in this particular field, we have to make sure that we do sound safety planning first. We need to make sure that before we take action, the victim is safe. Because if we change passwords, if we uninstall apps, and so on, the perpetrator might know it. This may escalate the forms of violence. So we have to pay special attention. So for this reason, we created the to-do guide, but if you can go on. So it's a to-do guide that starts from safety planning. So how can we protect the victim as professionals? What can we do on this? And I'm sorry, I have a problem with my computer. I think it's. Is it yours, Berta? Mine. Okay. Berta, can you go on? Can you skip to the next?
Sorry.
Okay. Okay. So it's important that when we work on this field, we first, before doing anything, that we make sure that the victim is safe. We need to make sure that she is protected. So, for example, we have to plan a safe communication channel. We have to teach her how to use the safe device, and we have to monitor the situation, and then we have, you know, to know what to do when we have a suspect, just a suspect, that she may be tracked or monitored, what to do when we know for sure that she is tracked or monitored. And then we need to know what to do in case of cyber harassment or other forms of cyber violence, like revenge porn, non-consensual sharing of images, and so on. And this guide is, you know, it goes deeper than the previous checklist. We have all in detail, we have all the information on how to work and how to deal with this, because as I said before, we are not IT techs. So for example, one of the tips that we give is just to, you know, find a trusted IT tech around your area, and just, you know, start collaborating with this technician to check phones and so on. Obviously, this part is the practical side of the training. So it's important that you first take the training, the online training, because, for example, it will give you all the information on how to check a device and how to see if there's stalkerware on the device, and how to behave if there is. So it's important that you first do that, do the training, and then start using the tools, because they go together. And without one, you cannot, you know, it's not complete without the other part. So the last tool here is the guide for women, that it's for everybody, I must say, you know. And we try to give a few, not many, it's just one page, a few tips on how to use phones safely. So how to check privacy settings on social media, to turn off, you know, locations and so on, and just to have an easy way to make sure that we use technology and social media in a safe way, and so on. Okay, so this is what we got so far. It's been interesting to work on these tools, because, as I said before, the more we go on, the more we would add, and it's not as, you know, straightforward as it seems. Cyber violence is really like an octopus. It has many different aspects that we have to take into consideration. So I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts and opinions on the tools that we devised. If you think that they can be useful, if you would change them or add something, yeah, let me know. Oh, they are not. So as I said, they are not available yet. The tools we are still working on them, so they will be available, I think, towards, well, the end of the project.
Yes, within the next probably year, right?
Yes. And also, you know, as technology evolves, we need to improve, you know, evolve our tools too. So we have to adapt them to new forms of cyber violence, new technologies that may come up, and so on. So it will always be a work in progress.
Okay, so it seems that maybe not everyone is seeing the slides. But basically we are towards the end now, and as Elena was saying, it would be very also useful for us to hear your comments, questions, suggestions. I know you haven't seen the whole set of tools and training, so it might be useful to give some feedback, but at least now I think you have an idea of what we are trying to develop, and maybe you can also have an idea if this is going to be useful, or if something is missing, or if you have any questions also on specific issues. Just feel free to write them in the chat, or you can just open the micro and say them aloud also, if you prefer.
Yeah, so we actually already had a question as the presentation was going from Anil from Nepal. That was a question directed to Elena. Just as they're starting a study on online intimate partner violence of teens and young people, they asked if it's possible to receive the questions that you have used, the questions that you were talking about. That's for Eleanor.
I think she's not, maybe she had a problem. I think she's not here, but I can also take it if you want.
Okay, yeah.
I would say yes, no problem to share the questions, but if it's okay, maybe let's wait until, because now these questions have been developed and we have them, it's a draft. Let's say it's in a draft. It's just a draft of the questions, and now all the partners, we have to review them and discuss them. And for that process, the inputs also of Kaspersky, the IT company, will be very helpful. So if it's possible for you to wait some months until we've done this process and we have the final tools, then obviously we will share them. Indeed, this will be an open deliverable that we will share in our website for all the different professionals, so you can always check on them. Elena, probably.
I'm back. I'm sorry, my computer just shut down suddenly. Okay.
Okay. No problem. Good. There was a question about sharing the questions that you added in the red flags. And I was just saying that if it's possible to wait for some months, we can share the final version.
Mm-hmm.
And another question from Anil. Can you tell Anil about the work on educating people in general for them not to become perpetrators? For example, on legal implication, impacts of cyber violence and sensitivity. So I suppose this is a question more about prevention, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we are thinking of developing, for example, workshops for young people on this topic and on the consequences of our actions and on the forms of control. I think that I'm not exactly an expert on work with young people. That's not my field of work. But as what I hear from colleagues or even from friends that have adolescents as children, they use, that we abuse technology. We are always with our phones in our hands. We take pictures of, like I said, of everything, and there is really no idea of what our actions can do to other people. So we want to work on this, on the consequences of our actions, and on taking responsibility for our work. But this is really the part that we still have not developed, so we are going to work. So if you have any suggestions on this, it's really welcome, because we can take all the advice that you can give us from your experience and then put it into the device, the tool that we are going to develop.
May I add something here? I think that the suggestion of Anil to focus on legal implications, the impacts that this cyber violence has on the victims or the survivors, increasing sensitivity around these issues. I think this is a nice focus, so that we don't give ideas to possible perpetrators. And also, as I was saying at the beginning, for the DeStalk project, the objective or main objective of the second year of the project, which is going to be next year, is to develop this dissemination campaign. So we want to have a campaign, and we will pilot it in Italy. But the idea is that this campaign to disseminate towards the general public can be then replicated to different European contexts and countries. So we know this is a very complex issue. So we have a whole year to work on this, and we will do also workshops and focus group with the stakeholders, public institutions, because we need them to be involved also and collaborate with us. So our idea is to gather information on how we can run this kind of complex campaign so that it's more safe than obviously damaging. And on the other hand, we know that this is, as Elena was saying, many of the youngsters are already aware of many of these things. So it's important to also do some education around that, because otherwise the only education they get from it is the internet or the peers. So this might not be, it's important to have this education in order to counterbalance something that is already probably there. So this is kind of the two issues that we will also develop with the DeStalk.
Yeah, thank you, Anil. That was a really interesting question and a really important topic to highlight. Does anybody else have any questions, any comments, anything that came up as the presentation was going? that you want to share or perhaps ask to the facilitators, you can either write them in the chat or you can also just unmute yourselves and ask.
Hi, good morning. Sorry. Thank you very much for the webinar. It's really, really interesting. I have sort of two questions. One is related to sexting. I was wondering if you imply every time that sexting is without consent, or is it just because we are talking about cyber violence and so we use the term sexting, meaning that there is a sharing of intimate photos or video without consent, or every time that you say sexting is meaning that is without consent. And then I have another question that is related also from the chat. We were talking about revenge porn and the use of the word porn that is not now correct, let's say. And it's interesting for me because like in Italy, we, from speaking with friends, we are talking about the fact that revenge porn is not a correct definition because the focus is on the victim, so there can be a second victimization, and also we try to use non-consensual sharing of intimate photos of videos or whatever. So do you think that we are somehow trying to change this definition, or revenge porn will like somehow stick and we, among just the people that knows, will use a different term? And thanks again. And yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting question. So I might say something and then Elena, maybe you can probably add to what I said. So sexting can be primary or secondary, if I'm not mistaken. And the primary sexting would be the one that you send yourself, and the secondary is the one that is sent from you by secondary, by other persons. So I think this is more or less the difference on this, on the conception of sexting. And for the second question, we had a lot of discussions about language use, not just on the types of cyber violence, but also on the if you want, label that we put to the victims and perpetrators. And we have a whole section on language use before the training, and we explain and we take a stand about why do we use the language that we use. And about this revenge, question on the images, we decided to use to not use porn and to use the image-based sexual abuse also. So Elena, I don't know if you want to add something to that.
Yes, yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We also have to, consider the fact that as for the term victim, we have, us professionals that work in the field, that we need to start using, the term survivor or the term, abuse and not porn in this case. But we also have to take into consideration that when we talk about the legal aspects, we have a law in Italy that specifically is against revenge porn. Even in Italian, it's called revenge porn. So when we address professionals working in the legal field, we have to still keep using that term. Maybe we can educate them on using, terms that are not, as heavy as they are, but we have to, balance the two things. The official terms that we have, for example, we discussed at length, in Italy, we can say, everywhere it's just vittima di violenza, victims of violence. If you start using survivors, just only a few support services will, acknowledge that and so on. But so it's a process that we have to start moving the opinion of the general public.
So the idea is to also change the language that we use, to change the mindset and how do we understand things. So this is like the first part of the training that we introduced that.
Great, thank you, Anna, for that question. I think it's very important to think about the semantics of this, especially since, as we've been discussing, it is a relatively new topic. So moving on to another question that we have in the chat from Naira from Russia. She is asking what you think, can a victim of cyber violence apply such measures as changing their phone password if she's not able to separate from the perpetrator? That seems, she says it's often the case in Russia that women have nowhere to go. So presumably that means that they're stuck living with the perpetrator. So how can they protect themselves from cyber violence in that case?
So yes, this is a really important issue, something that goes in the IT safety planning that we talked about earlier. So we are aware that it's not always possible. Many women still live with the perpetrator, and so we were thinking about how can we deal with this. So the first thing is, for example, to try and see if the women can borrow another device, a safe device. It can be, she can buy a new device with a new SIM card would be the best option. If she cannot, an old mobile phone with no internet could be very good too, with a new number. So, and start using, teach and educate the victim on how to manage two devices. So to use the safe devices only for communications with support service, with a lawyer, with the police, with a doctor, and so on. But still keep on using the track and monitor device, not to write the suspects of the perpetrator. So, but using it only for common communications without giving away too much information, but not stopping any information at all. So this could be a solution. So it's important, as you see, we said in the to-do guide, change passwords. Yes, that would be the easy solution, but we have to go through the what to do guide to see when it's safe to change passwords. We need to be sure that the action that we take is the safe one, and we take it only when it's safe to do so. So this is why we need, we need the training to learn about these things, and we need to go through all the tools just to learn the steps and how to, put them in the right order and do things correctly.
And this is the same for many forms of cyber violence, as we have included also in the training. Removing stalkerware, it's not safe because usually the perpetrator gets a notification that it has been removed. So that might obviously increase violence. So this IT safety plan that we do at the beginning with the victim or the survivor is really crucial in order to make sure that every action that we take is safe. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. I think that gave a really detailed answer to that question, which is obviously very complex to deal with. So moving on, we have another question in the chat from Christian, who is asking if you plan to frequently update the toolkit in order to address the new technical forms of stalkerware, which will inevitably spring up.
Yes, of course. So the toolkit for us, it's going to be part of our everyday work. So we will update it often, and we will share it with, I think, on WWP's page after that. So you will see it. Obviously, if anyone has any suggestion or comes up with new forms, all suggestions are welcome, and we will work on it and add on it.
I would just want to mention also that WWP is founder member of the Coalition Against Stalkerware, which is an international coalition of IT companies and professionals from NGOs working with both with perpetrators and victims. And within this coalition, basically what we do is to share new possible forms of stalking and stalkerware, and also to share possible actions to be taken. So all these will also be updated, so that will be used to update the DeStalk tools.
Great. It's one of our participants has just commented in the chat. It doesn't seem to be a question, but maybe it's a comment that you can address, that they have said we should develop adolescent-friendly sensitization messages targeting mainly adolescent girls in schools who are a bigger percentage of victims of cyber violence. What do you think of that?
Yes.
And in the focus group that we ran with professionals of victim services, that was one of the things that we were mentioning, that they really said that we need to focus on prevention, and that it was really astonishing how many of these young girls do not realize of the risks of the actions that they take. So totally agree about that. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And another question from Sylvia in the chat. What can a victim do to protect themselves if the perpetrator is a police officer who might abuse or stalk the victim via multiple channels and not leave any evidence?
Oh, this is a good question. And honestly, this is not my field, so I'm not very expert on this. So I have.
I guess this is what we will find out when we have this consultation with police officers and lawyers nationally in each of the partner countries. So as Elena mentioned, what we want to include also in the tools is information from police officers and from lawyers in the field in order to kind of have this tool on IT aspects or evidence collection and things like this. So in that moment, I guess we will get more information on that, but that seems a really complicated situation. I don't know if someone else from the audience has other ideas.
Yeah, if you have anything to contribute to that, anybody in the audience, feel free to write in the chat or open your microphone. In the meantime, we have another comment in the chat from Simon, who says he understands we do not want to educate perpetrators about new ways to inflict cyber violence.
Exactly. So there are, it's really easy to inflict cyber violence. So, and can be done with any kind of, technical tool or simple apps. So we do not want to be too specific, to give too many information. We need to, to find out there's cyber violence. They're already using some kind of tools to inflict cyber violence, but without teaching them how to do it. So the process of change with them is we start with talking about control and speaking about the need, for example, to share everything. Talking about secrets and personal space and the use of personal information and so on. So we start from that and we build on the control issue, as we said.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you for that. So I think that answered both of your comments and questions, Simon. Does anybody else have any questions or any comments to make before we wrap up the webinar? So a comment from Silvana, who says education should be very basic, teaching what is accepted and what's not, what needs never be shared as per pictures or personal information of teens mainly.
Exactly. Going back to the simplicity that we were saying before, to really focus on very basic tips and ideas. And
yeah. Great. Do we get a copy of the slides, Berta?
Yeah, we can share them and also maybe upload them. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also the recording will be published as well, so you'll be able to watch this back.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not the ones with the tools. I don't know. Let's see. We can talk about it because they are not ready. But
okay. Good. So unless anybody has any more questions. Oh, we have one more. This is Anil again from Nepal, from Child SafeNet. They've developed 4 toolkits on protecting children and young people online, and they'll be happy to share the toolkits when they're finalized. So that would be great. Yes, please do share them with us.
It would be really great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great. So thank you everybody for joining us today. As you see in the slides, there are a couple of links, one to registering for the training that has been discussed and one for taking part in the survey. I know that you aren't able to copy and paste these links from the slide because we're just sharing the screen. So let me put those in the chat for you, and then you will be able to access those. And I will also send around a follow-up email after the webinar. So I'll put these links for you in that email as well. I'll also put the link to the DeStalk newsletter that you're able to subscribe to, so you can stay up to date with all the developments of the DeStalk project. As we already asked you in the sign-up form for this event, if you wanted to be signed up to the WWP general newsletter or our events mailing list as well, that will happen. Berta has just mentioned in the chat that the DeStalk training is free. So it's a really great resource, and I hope that many of you will sign up for it. Also, a lot of you seem very knowledgeable in the field as well, so I think it will be really great to have you all on board. And I will also just mention, of course, we run many events at WWP alongside our network members and our project partners. We're very lucky to have a great network. And in a couple of months, in September, we will be having our annual conference on the 22nd and 23rd. This conference is talking about perpetrator work within migrant communities, which is a really interesting, very sensitive topic. We're going to be hearing from lots of experts in the field, and I hope that you will be also able to join us there. And I will also send this link in the follow-up email. So thank you all very much. Yeah, I hope you all have a great summer.